So today we're going to talk about doing the upgrade. Today we're going to talk about, we know what to do before, we know why, what are the steps we should do to actually have a successful upgrade, and what are some pitfalls we can avoid. And I need to get over here because my slides are being controlled differently. Apologize. Let's see if I can do this right. Perfect, I can. So again, this series, we're really, oops, yeah, I did it too fast. You're in week 3, and here in week 3, let me see if I move my mouse around. There we go. Here in week 3, we're talking about doing the upgrade. So some best practices for the new SQL install. How can you minimize downtime, right? How can we get the environment upgraded with having your users waiting nervously for less time? How can we do it with success? What are some ways to test to know we got all the data? Next week, we'll talk about after the upgrade. And really, next week, it has nothing to do with upgrades. I mean, it does, because we should be looking at these things after we upgrade. But if you don't upgrade your SQL Server, and if you're not planning on an upgrade, next week's going to be packed with good content for you to just be a better DBA, and to watch your environment better. So who am I? I've said this each week. My name's Mike. You can find out more about me on my blog, straightpathsql.com. I run a company called StraightPath. We do SQL Server consulting, managed services. We help people upgrade projects. We do all sorts of SQL work. But I have a lot of upgrade scars. And being a consultant, we get to do a lot of upgrades, right? So when I was a full-time DBA, I could probably count on 1 or 2 hands the number of times I had to upgrade a SQL Server. And the only reason I'd have 2 hands is because I was a job hopper early on. I was always a consultant. I just didn't realize it. Most people just don't do a lot of upgrades, but we do a lot of them as consultants because we have a lot of different clients at different phases of the life cycle. So we've seen the problems, and we've gotten called into the upgrades that went oops, or we've had the people who didn't heed advice and tried an upgraded path that maybe we don't like and got burned by it. So where are we? Again, I already kind of gave the recap. These are the things we should know, though. After the earlier 2 webinars, we should know why we want to upgrade. I mean, obviously, that's a pretty easy question, but we should know some of the reasons why we want to, and some of the reasons why we can, the reasons that maybe our management wants to hear, right? So hey, dear leader, here's why you should want me to upgrade. So that little reverse psychology. Then we already talked about where we want to go. So we should have an idea of that. Again, you need to do the upgrade analysis with the upgrade advisor. We talked last week about the DEA tool, the database experimentation analysis tool. We can talk about doing the SQL Server database tools last week and building towards your target. But the point is we should know roughly where we want to be. We should have an idea of what our environment looks like, right? We talked last week about running a health check, and I gave you guys talked about a link, and that link for the download is actually on the blog post from week 2's video already. We can run our health check PDF, or you can go and download the Blitz scripts or the Glenn Berry scripts or any scripts. I don't care. That's well trusted by the community, and see where you are. We should have a performance baseline, so we make sure that the new environment we build will have the right performance. And we should have a rough idea of which approaches we want to use to test, right? How do we know that we can support the new compatibility mode? Because going to the new version is really cool, but it's really important to also be able to work in the latest compatibility mode if we can, so we can take advantage of the new features. So we can use windowing functions, for example. And then we should have an idea. We talked last week about rollback and sort of go/no-go criteria. And I said it's not a go-go, right? It's just go, no-go. Most companies don't have a no-go. They just have a go, and we're going to go whatever you say. But we need to be the pesky, annoying DBAs who say, yeah, but, and explain the problems, right? So that's kind of where we should. So where are we going to go? Well, today is going to be about how. So we're going to zoom in on the how. How should we install SQL? We're not going to go into in-depth on that because that's a whole webinar by itself. But we have a download we'll have in the blog post about this for that. And like I said, I can't give you the links to Webinar Ninja. And the people watching the videos won't be able to get them anyway. So we're going to put them on the blog post. So what's going to happen is we'll do a webinar on Thursday. And then by Tuesday of the next week, so 3 business days later, there'll be a blog post with a video and a transcript and links we talked about, and any downloads that we say we'll make for you. Normally, this downloadable content we'll probably use like a lead magnet on our website, and people can come and give us their email address and all that. But for people coming to the webinar, I just want it to be a free thing for you. So you'll just have a direct download link, get it. I don't want your email address. Just take it and use it. So we'll have a checklist that we use to help guide us on SQL Server best practices. And that checklist alone could probably be a 3-part webinar series, but we'll give you that. How should you organize your own checklist for the upgrade? Right? We're going to talk about that today quite a lot. And then again, next week on the Tuesday, we'll have a sample checklist that you can use and fill in. We're going to talk about how to best execute an in-place upgrade versus a migration-based upgrade. How do we minimize downtime? How do we do a test ahead of time? How do we do a test after? These are the things we're going to talk about this week. So let's first, I just want to talk about in-place upgrades first to get this out of the way. I have a pretty simple in-place upgrade process. My first step for an in-place upgrade is you have to obtain the SQL Server installation media. So, go to MSDN, go to your volume licensing portal, wherever you get it. I mean, you can even get the old DVD, right? So this is SQL Server 2012. At the MVP Summit once, they gave us a pretty cool sign book. But the DVD's not in there. It's just an empty package with all the signatures of the program team. It's kind of neat. I keep it up here. It's an old version of SQL. And I don't encourage you to use old versions of SQL, but I just like this little, I don't know, it's nice. It's nice. I like nice stuff. It's just, it was touching. Mass produced, but still touching. So then you run setup, right? So you get your install media, you get it up there, you run setup executable, and then you just stop. Seriously, you stop, right? Throw it away. Don't do an in-place upgrade, right? If you were here like hanging on the edge, just saying, oh, this is great. Now, I understand. There are situations in life where you have no choice. You're on a physical server. The management says, this is how we're going to do our upgrade, and we're not buying a new server, and we have no swing server. Deal with it. Yes, there are situations where an in-place upgrade is your only choice. I've done them. I've helped people do them. They are so risky. I don't like in-place upgrades. As far as it's up to you, put your foot down and say, we will never do an in-place upgrade. And here's the deal. If you're on a SQL Server 2008, when was it last built? I mean, if you happen to buy brand new SQL Server hardware last year and you just moved your 10-year-old SQL Server 2008 to it, well, yeah, it's new hardware. Maybe they don't want to spend the money, and I understand that. But most of us are in virtual. Many of us are in the cloud. There's other ways to do it. We had one person ask us about an in-place upgrade, and we said we don't recommend it. Here's all the reasons why, even though it's simple. And they went ahead and tried it, and they said, nope, don't worry, we're going to do it. And we said, okay, we'll support you if you need it. And 99%, maybe 95%, maybe 90, whatever, some percentage of the time, not as good as 99.9, but some percentage of the time they work flawlessly. When they go bad, though, they go really bad. And when they go bad in the middle of your upgrade, you have no rollback, right? Your rollback is to start mashing buttons, to hope the old version works, to try the uninstaller, and to do a bunch of stuff to your production SQL server that's been your bread and butter database server for how many years. So I'm not a fan of it, right? It's pretty clear. Again, they're not that bad. They have to happen sometimes, and if you want to see more, I'll have a link for this. But if you just do a Google search for dba.stackexchange.com and you search for in-place upgrade, you'll find this answer I gave. It's well upvoted. I have 91 votes on it. But this is just one page. You'd have to press the page down button like 4 times. Anybody who's in this webinar who's worked with me as an employer, as an employee, as a customer, you've sadly probably seen my long emails, and I'm working on it. But some of my Stack Overflow answers can be long too. But my short answer is no, don't do in-place. And if you have a question about in-place upgrade, throw it in the comments and we can talk about it, or we can talk about it in the live webinar where we do the Q&A in a couple of weeks. So the first thing we do is we're going to install SQL Server on the new. Now, hopefully you've actually done this in test already a couple of times. We talked about this last week. You want to test your migration, test your compatibility mode, have your applications point to it, like get a test version of your. The ideal thing to do is for you, before you do your upgrade, to do an upgrade advisor, maybe to do the DEA tool, and then maybe take SQL Server database tools and run a build against it. Now, that's for your database. If it's your vendor database, it might be as easy as talking to your vendor and ask them what do they support, and just cross your fingers, pray, meditate, whatever you need to do. Hope that your vendor is going to be compliant. Oh yeah, of course, we've already tested it and we certify it. You're good. It's easy. Sadly, a lot of our vendors just don't play that game for us. Actually, I shouldn't say a lot. Half do, half don't. So it's 50-50. But if it's your own application, you want to actually run a build against it, against a target for the version you want to go, and just see what breaks. But all of those tests alone are not as good as deploying on SQL Server X. So let's say you're on 2008 today and you want to go to 2017, upgrade to 2017 and test, deploy your database, get it all good there, and then point your test suite to it, point your applications to it, and do a full regression test and see what breaks. There's no better testing than a full regression test to see what breaks. Once you're done, build a new server, build it right. So remember, you have an awesome opportunity here. You have a chance to take all the knowledge you've gained over the past 10 years and apply it to this new server. You can configure max stop. You can make sure power savings are enabled. You can finally have 64K drive allocation size when you format your drives. You can, if you're on a VM, you can do the right data stores and paravirtual SCSI card connectors. And, you can do all the best practices that you keep reading about in the SQL Server community, but you say, well, I don't want to touch it because it's already here and we don't want to break it. We're going to wait till the next version. The next version's here. You have no choice by July if you're on SQL Server 2008 and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on Microsoft or move to Azure and get their secret, Slugworth deal, whatever his name is from Willy Wonka. But you have a chance now to build your SQL Server to best practices. Run a health check on it, even though there's nothing on it yet. Run a health check and see what settings you got wrong. Add as a maintenance. If you don't have Ola Hallengren maintenance scripts or some trusted maintenance solution, install that in the new server and experiment with it. So when you migrate over there, you don't have to say, oh yeah, don't, because here's the deal. Tomorrow is a big enemy of us. It's an enemy of me. Tomorrow is the worst word in our career. How many times have the migration happened and it finally gets done and something goes wrong, a little bit minor, but it's not big. You get it solved at 1 a.m. and you say, all right, in the morning, I'll fix the backups. In the morning, I'll fix the index maintenance. In the morning, I'll fix this. Why do that? Set up your maintenance the right way today and have it scheduled automatically. It'll be really quick right now with no user databases on it for the 2 weeks you're waiting to migrate, but set it up ahead of time and then it's just good to go. Set it up automatic is good, and setting up ahead of time is good. Don't recreate security woes. I mean, does the whole entire world have sysadmin access to your SQL Server? If they do, fix it. Now, there's two schools of thought there. I get that. Some people will say, well, yeah, but we're doing a migration. We want to break as few things as possible. I get that, sure. But if you can start over and have the best practices in mind, do that. And again, if we have a test first mentality, we'll test this and we'll see what breaks. Does your vendor really need SA access to your consolidated SQL Server? Probably not. And will your compliance people like to know they do? Probably not. Not even probably. They don't. Period. End of story. They don't even like that you have SA access. Again, you want to pick the right resources. So we talked last week about grabbing some perf data and doing a baseline analysis. If we do that baseline analysis and we know what we need and we know what we're using, we can actually build the new server to spec and build it with the right amount of resources. Yeah. Oh, so Mark just mentioned a great comment. Mark says, I have nothing but praise for Ola Hallengren, but make sure that his defaults are appropriate in your environment. Yeah, absolutely. We just had a conversation the other day with somebody on my team about this. Not somebody on my team, but somebody off my team. The defaults are bad. If you just take the default index maintenance job and run it, you're doing an index maintenance. And if you schedule it every night, thinking you just want to update your stats, every night you're doing an index rebuild and you're not even updating your stats. So don't just, true of any script, don't just take the script and run it. You want to actually go to ola.hallengren.com or whatever his website is. If you just do a Google search for Ola SQL, and you'll find him. But you can say Ola Hallengren, HAEENGREN, and SQL, and you'll find his blog or his maintenance solution website, really. And if you just click on any of the links like index optimize or backup, you'll see like pages of options, and he even gives examples. So there's really no excuse to run the defaults. Do not do it. Thanks, Mark. That was a great point. And don't forget to enable the maintenance cleanup, right? So you have a new server, keep your MSDB happy from the beginning. Do your MSDB cleanup history right away. Do your job agent history cleanup right away. Keep these things pruned and well oiled from the beginning. Recycle your error log on a regular basis. We'll talk next week about some best practices in the after, and kind of talk about some of the things that we find in health checks commonly. And get your monitoring set up. Again, we'll talk more about that next week. And here's a big thing. I'm a big fan of CNAMEs and aliases and not connecting to server names. I like, if I have 10 applications on a consolidated SQL server, I might be as crazy as asking IT for 10 CNAMEs. Now, you don't have to go that far if you don't want to, but I don't like people connecting to the SQL by its actual host name. I want them to use a CNAME always. And there are schools of thought, like, is it silly to have a CNAME if it's going to an AG listener or a failover cluster instance, because that's kind of a CNAME going to a CNAME? Yeah, maybe, but I like him still. And this is because I'm thinking my future upgrade, right? SQL Server is now coming out every couple of years. Their servicing model is different. Starting in 2019, there'll be no more service packs. We'll just have CUs and Slipstream CU updates. So SQL updates come fast and furious now. You don't have to take the train every time it comes by your stop, but you shouldn't be 4 trains behind, like many people are today, or 5. So if we're going to start upgrading more frequently, we want to make our upgrades easier. And if we take the pain today and make a CNAME and migrate to it, what that does 2 things for us. We'll talk in a second when I talk about Operation Honeypot and how that can help us. But it also makes future migrations easier. So you're making today's self mad, like, this is stupid. But in 2 years, your future self will say, thank you. And I can tell you how I could sit here for hours and talk about all the ways that old Mike screwed over today's Mike, and I hate it. Right here at the farm, we're running out of our firewood. We probably burned 5 cords this year. It's been so cold a couple times, and we're not using oil. And I cut my wood way too late, so it's way too green, and I'm probably going to buy a cord of wood this weekend, and it's going to be way too expensive. But I'm stubborn; I don't want to burn oil. I'm mad at the Mike who was sitting on the couch last spring or 2 springs ago, instead of cutting down woods here at the farm. Take the time today to make your future self like you. It will be amazing. So make the CNAME, and when we talk about Operation Honeypot in just a few slides, it will give you another tool to find those non-compliant, frustrating developers and vendors. So we're not going to read all the slides here. You can get the slides on the blog post when I share it next Tuesday, but it starts with a plan, right? So you got to have an upgrade checklist. I love checklists. I don't use checklists nearly as much as I should. I'm on the fire department. We have some checklists there for truck checks, and we have checklists in the ambulance for certain cardiac emergencies. Checklists are a really important tool. If like I said last week, if they're good enough for surgeons, if they're good enough for pilots, even big restaurants, chefs use them. I mean, if they're good enough for all these other industries, I think they're okay for us to use too. So all these are the kind of things that go on a checklist. And again, I'm not going to talk about these, but think about the things that we want to do before, right? So there's kind of 3 components of a checklist, just like there's 3 components of my webinar. There's before, there's during, and there's after. And there's kind of flavors of before and flavors of during. There's kind of like during the night of, and there's during the week before. But for the before side of the checklist, these are the things, what do you use, right? This burns people so much. Do the full inventory and understand what you use. Understand what tools and components you're using. Understand if you're using encryption. You don't want to get to cut overnight and say, oh, I forgot about this. And we talked last week, dbatools.io is really great. It doesn't have all the answers for you. But if you look at all the PowerShell commands that are there, you'll look at that, and if you kind of use that as almost interrogate yourself, and I'm gonna actually mention that in the checklist that we give next Tuesday. If you use that as a Q&A for yourself, almost interrogate yourself and look at all the commands in DBA tools and say, do I use that? Do I use that? Do I use that? And check. Do I use that? And check. And you'll do kind of 3 things. Number 1, you'll get annoyed. Number 2, you'll see what you use. and you'll know what features are in use. And number three, you might learn a few things, right? You might take an extra 20 minutes to have to look at your server and say, am I using this? What is this? And sometimes, and if it's a what is this question, hopefully you're not using it. And if you are using it, then you better learn about it and you better start looking at it. But if you're not using it, file it away and just ask yourself, what is that? This could be your upgrade can be a way for you not just to make your environment better, make your users happier, make your management happier, save you money, and all these other peace and harmony things. But it can be a way for you to learn more about what's in SQL Server, what's changed since we put the SQL Server 2008 covenant layer of dust in place. Get your phone numbers, your phone trees, your vendor support numbers. Again, I'm not going to read through all of this, but one thing that's really important, I think, is and again, I have a whole webinar or a whole presentation just about a professional development talk about learning from aviation disasters. And one of the things that gets engineers in so much trouble and has gotten a lot of pilots in trouble and their passengers in trouble, sadly, in plane crashes, is you can get stuck troubleshooting. And when I was a kid, so I just turned 40, so I'm not old, not young. I'm kind of in the middle. I was a big fan of this game called Civilization. Like, it was like Civ 1. And I could start playing that game as a kid on my old computer at night. And after school, 2:00, I maybe grabbed my dinner, maybe didn't if mom was working an overnight shift as a nurse. And I start, exactly, John said, just one more turn. And I'm just going to have one more turn. And finally, you get done and you get up to, go to the bathroom or stand up and you look around, like the sun's coming out. You're like, what just happened? So it's easy to get stuck. When you're fixing a problem, it's so easy for that part of our mind, that engineer part of our mind, to sit here and say, I can fix this. I'm going to fix this. And I'm not going to stop until I fix this. Well, many airplanes, especially before crew resource management, are in pieces in the ground and in warehouses after accidents, because of that, because people get stuck troubleshooting, and there was nobody to help pop the stack, if you will, and say, whoa, we've spent too much time troubleshooting, we have to stop. It's a big thing for us in the ambulance too. We can spend a lot of time on scene packaging a patient after a car accident just so right. Like, this bone, my camera's low. This arm has to be set just right because it was bent a little bit. This finger's hurt, and this is hurt and that's hurt. Meanwhile, they have a punctured lung and they have gross bleeding and their pulse is weak and thready because they have a head injury. And and you're doing all this time fixing the things that you have control over while ignoring things you don't have control over. And nobody's made that decision to exit and drive to the hospital, or exit and fly the plane. Or in our upgrade case, we need to identify ahead of time, how much time do we have? Who's going to be our timekeeper? In a plane, who's going to be our watch the sky keeper and our watch the fuel keeper and fly the plane? Somebody during an upgrade has to be the project manager. I know us techies have this knee-jerk reaction against project managers. Rightfully so. No, it's not rightfully so. I'm just kidding. Maybe. But we need to have a project manager at the end of the upgrade. So who's going to do that? And where are the rules? And where are we going to say, stop, we're rolling back? And by the way, if you go back a few slides, when I teased you with my Inplace upgrade tips, if you have an Inplace upgrade, you have to have less time. You can't have as much time to troubleshoot because your rollback is so easy. If you're doing a CNAME change, new server, you make a new server, you take all your database offline. We'll talk about that in a second. You migrate to it, you point your connection strings to it, or you just change your CNAME, whatever you're doing. And if you have a problem, you say, oh, this is too bad. Let's troubleshoot it. And finally, once the timekeeper says, hey, listen, you have 30 minutes left, we have to either roll back in 30 minutes or say we're good. So I need to have an answer. Once that person says that, you can go right up to 29.5 minutes fixing, yeah, I got it at the last second. Or you can roll back, because all you have to do is turn off, turn back on. As long as you haven't given access to anybody, you can just roll back, change your connection strings back, bring the databases back online in the old server. Everything's good. With an in-place upgrade, yeah, you have to have that happen an hour and a half ago, so you can uninstall and fix what the installer broke and maybe restore, blah, blah, blah. But you need to have that in your checklist ahead of time. At every phase, where are we going to stop? Who's going to be our timekeeper? Who's going to watch this? Because this is so important. Scope creep happens. So during, and again, I say during, it's really kind of like I said, 2 phases of during. There's sort of the during after we're done, after we've determined we're going to upgrade. So before to me is we need to upgrade. Where are we going? How are we going to do it? Why? What version? Will it work? During to me is kind of the sort of like, there's like during 1, which is we're going to build a new server. And there's during 2, which is we're cutting over. So I consider all that lumped into during. Now, maybe on my checklist, if I tweak it, because it's still a work in progress, if I tweak it once more, I might have a second name for that phase. And if you have a name for that phase, put it in the chat and I'll use it. But we're going to provision a new server. We're going to install SQL the best practices. We're going to run a health check on it, right? So do the health check and save that health check. Imagine how that looks to management and to your auditors, that you have this run book of what your environment looked like and how it checked on your health check. Do your row counts the night of go live. We'll talk about that in a second, right before and right after. So you can then have that document, even if nobody's asked for it, just do it. Be the nerdy, geeky person that has all this documentation filed away in nice little folders on your computer, and don't wait for them to ask you for it. Share it. Say, hey, we did the upgrade. Here's what the configuration looked like before. Here's all the features we're using. Here's our checklist of features that we're using after. Here's all the database names. Here's all the row counts. Here's our health check. Here's our maintenance schedule. Here you go. I'm taking next Wednesday off because you have to be there Monday and Tuesday to watch things. But I'm taking Wednesday off. Please, pat me on my back because it's good for your resume, and it's not just the reason to do it. It's really good because it shows that you care. And as DBAs, right? I say database advocate. I say database advocate is what it stands for. I mean, some people say don't bother asking and all those jokes, but we are maybe this is wrong again. Maybe some other people with other roles will yell at me, but I think the DBA, or the person who has to be the DBA, so whether you're accidental or on purpose, but the DBA is the only person in the company, in my mind, who cares about the data. Now, I know that's such a stretch. I know, but work with me here. That should be the attitude we have. And in many companies, when you watch what some of the developers and sysadmins and management and vendors do, it might be true. I don't know. So that's how that works. And again, we talked about the CNAME already. And we're going to go a little bit longer. So if you have to jump off, at 12:30, I said 30, 40 minutes. So we're at 12:30 now. We're probably another 10 or 15. If you have to drop, this is recorded, but if you want to stay and ask questions, stay and ask questions. So then for your plan, we have to have the after as well. What are we going to do after? Remember Ron Popeil's rotisserie chicken? So if you remember Civilization, you probably remember infomercials. And if you remember infomercials, you probably remember Ron Popeil. And if you remember him, you remember the Showtime rotisserie chicken. Anybody remember? Type in the chat if you do. There's a lot of you here, but you're shy. Set it and forget it. Exactly, John. John's not shy. Set it and forget it. That is exactly what people think SQL Server is. You just press next a bunch of times, then you press finish once, and then it's good to go. That's not true. You have to monitor. You have to do maintenance. We talked about maintenance a little bit ago. Mark's comment about the OLA scripts. We should do a daily review, whether we have a tool doing that, whether we have a junior DBA doing that, whether we have a PowerShell tool like DBA checks that's telling us each day. We have to know each day that we're good, because entropy happens. And you can build a server today and walk away, and you will have problems eventually. It might take a year, it might take 10 years for some people. We get phone calls all the time from people, and the conversation goes like this: hey, we have SQL Server, and I don't really know what's going on. It's been working fine for 7 years, and it just started getting slower. Well, that happens all the time. Set up alerts. So you built a security, you fixed security on the way over to this new environment, and you built a new security model. Well, keep your security posture. I say no. That should be our favorite word as a DBA. And then I had a blog post this week, and I just want to have a quick little offline thought. This wasn't in the deck originally, but this came in. There's a blog post from me on, I think, Wednesday or Tuesday this week. And I talk about an email hack that happened at VF Email. And it's really sad what happened. A hacker came in, they sort of they got into their credential store, and they got into their password management, and somehow they managed to get all credentials to all different environments all online, and they deleted all their backups and all of their systems. And they had no offline backups. And they just lost 3 years of data. They happen to have some data from 2016 because they had an old backup for some other purpose, not for security or for management, but they had the backup just sitting around just in case. And I'll give you the link here, I think, if I can grab it. And of my post, but I'll put in the link if I can't. Here it goes. But here's the deal. I got a little nervous about this because a lot of companies nowadays are saying, well, I back up to the cloud. We're backing up to a blob storage, or we're backing up to some sort of online tape library, and it's in 2 locations, and we're doing zero redundancy. All these backup approaches, even doing multi-cloud, like we're in Azure S3, Blob, and we're in AWS S3, like that's a great backup strategy. That's a really, really, really fault-tolerant backup strategy. You're multi-cloud protected. If your data center dies, you're okay. But the one thing I just didn't really think of when I look at these solutions, and until this hack, is that's great. You're not going to have any problems from data loss. You're not going to have any problems from corruption. As long as you're doing check DBs and all that, you're not going to have any problem created by a bad system. You could lose Azure, could go out of business, and all their data centers all across the country could blow up, and you're fine because you're still in S3. But it's online, and if somebody can get into online, no matter how many, if you can have 75,000 layers of protection, right? So you have all these layers of protection, but there's still one point of failure in your security schemes. There's always going to be one point of failure in your security schemes. It's really you and me. So offline backups need to fit into your model. And if you don't do offline backups today, look at that post and start doing offline backups. And then and I noticed in my link, that's great. As I see it in the chat, I see I said destroyos instead of destroys. I can't fix it because it's already live. The URL is wrong, but it's the right URL. Go ahead and go on that. But anyway, make sure you think of these things, right? Don't just say I did my upgrade and I'm good to go. Yeah, that's a good point, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Andy Leonard reminds me I can do redirects. I should fix that. I'll fix it and redirect. Thank you. Yeah. So that's that. Now, what about a minimal downtime cutover? I keep talking about these things, right? So it's log shipping, right? Or log shipping. I don't care if you actually use log shipping. In fact, for a lot of our small, easy, simple migrations, migration upgrades, we don't actually use log shipping. We have a couple clients where we are taking like 500 databases from one data center to another, or going up to AWS or Azure, IaaS. And in that case, we'll actually build some table-driven log shipping. I don't do that. Jack on my team, I'm a good DBA. I'm not a good table driving kind of guy anymore. I'm getting too old for that. I don't know. Maybe I'm not too old, but I'm just I'm not as good as my people. They're a lot better. But it doesn't have to be official log shipping, but it's the same principle as log shipping, right? So just one example, and now this example could be whatever, but let's say on cutover minus 3 days. So let's say we're going live on Saturday. So Friday, Thursday, Wednesday. So on Wednesday, maybe if it's big environment, if it's small, we can do this all Friday night, but we're going to cutover minus something. We're going to take a full database backup of your source databases, and then stop your full backup job, because we don't want to have a full backup job go in and mess up our differential chain or anything like that. So take a full backup, stop your full backups, but keep your diffs running. A lot of people sometimes get confused, like they think we're migrating, we don't need to worry. You still need to worry because your environment's not fully caught up yet. On maybe a day before cutover, take that day's differential. For large databases, a day before makes sense. Maybe for small databases, you can just do it on cutover day a few hours before, but take a differential, restore it with no recovery. On cutover day, maybe take that final diff if you want. You don't need to. If you didn't do it before, do it now. Restore it with no recovery. Then start taking log backups. And, if it's a simple environment with not a lot of change, maybe you'll change your log backup schedule to hourly or half an hour if you're doing it manually. But you can script it. You can have log backups running every minute and just script the restore. So it's not going to be hard on you. And then at cutover time, confirm it's down, wait, confirm it's down, wait, confirm it's down. So I used to work at a hotel, and I worked in the kitchen for a long time. And in the walk-in, there was stuff that we would eat in the kitchen. Like it was okay to eat in the kitchen because we're kitchen employees and we could eat this stuff. But those front desk people couldn't eat it. Well, I upgraded myself, or downgraded, depending on how you look at it, to the kitchen, to the front desk. And that's where I met my wife. Long story, but that's how I met my wife. So it was actually an upgrade. I was her manager, her assistant manager, and I asked to be put on her schedule when I first saw her come in. Anyway, but I'm probably turning red. But when I was working as a front desk guy, we had an overnight auditor quit, and I was the assistant manager, so I had to be the overnight auditor for a while. Because when you're in charge, you do the jobs that nobody else is doing. Or you should anyway. And you should do all the jobs, by the way. But that's a whole other topic of leadership, not DBA. And I would go into the kitchen and get some of the food that the kitchen people allowed. So I wouldn't go and like take lobster or like the roast beef, for the special tomorrow. But I take the food the kitchen people are allowed to kind of munch on throughout the day. One time, and the it's padlocked. The walk-in refrigerator is padlocked, but on our keychain we had all the keys. Anyway, one time I left the padlock in there, and I left the keys in there on the rack, and I padlocked the door. And that was an interesting morning. I didn't get in trouble because it was one of those things. And the bartender came in the next morning to do his inventory. He let me in. But ever since then, I don't have any keys here to show you. But whenever I lock my door in my car, whenever I lock the door in the house, even though I have to use my key to do it, I still look at my hand, and I look to make sure I have the key, and I say, "Do I have the key? I have the key. Do I really have the key? I really have the key. Now I'll lock it." I don't know why I do that, but ever since that moment when I was like 17, 19 years old, whatever I was, I do that. Do that with your cutovers. Am I really down? Make your web people hate you. Are we sure? How do I know you're sure? Okay, I'm going to turn off SQL Server and turn it back on again and see if I have any connections come in. And I do that sometimes because I'm paranoid. I don't want to have to deal with 10 transactions or 4,000 if you're a really busy environment coming in, and that quick moment between my last log backup and turn the databases offline. I want to make sure that we've shut down as much as we can. Changing network names. If you're doing CNAMEs, well, just have your network team change the CNAME. So this is another reason to use a CNAME, because you can just have them turn the CNAME off. Point the CNAME to null, or whatever they can do in the networking side, but make it so the CNAME does not come to the SQL Server. Be double sure, and then take your count, take your log backup, take your count, take the database offline. And I like to log backup first, because if somebody came in right before my count, so I want it to be log backup, last log backup. So all that double checks I talked about, last log backup, count, offline. And I don't turn my server offline typically. Now there's caveats. I like to keep my server online. We'll talk about why in a second with Operation Honeypot. But if I keep the server online, I can go there and say, "Oh crap, this isn't working. What login was changed, or what happened?" I can go and do those things afterwards. And by the way, what's not here is all the other stuff. You have to use DBA tools that we talked about last week to move your logins, move your jobs, all those things you should be moving ahead of time, and either tightly controlling, and hopefully in your environment you don't have just random people creating logins. If you do, that's a whole other problem, and we'll have to have a security series of webinars. But hopefully you know what's happening, and it's a tightly locked down environment. Right? Go into lockdown mode a week or two before. Code freeze, environment freeze, config freeze. We're not changing anything. And then you can do a lot of your config ahead of time. But make sure you have it, do some due diligence, but keep the old server around, because things happen. And we'll talk about that in a couple slides, but things happen. So confirm the row counts, and then do the reverse. Restore the last final with recovery, confirm the row counts again, make sure they're good. And if they're good, now go for the rest of your steps. And there's other options, other approaches. There's database snapshots. There's VM snapshot. There's what you also, I won't say one thing is detach and attach. I hate detach for the same reason I look at my keys 2 times when I lock something. I hate to detach for the same reasons why I use copy instead of cut. Detach is final. If once you detach a database from SQL, you can accidentally do something stupid to that file. And I've built the whole entire resume of doing stupid stuff, especially at late night, and especially with everybody watching, and especially being busy. So you want to protect yourself from yourself. So don't do detach and attach. Do backups. And then by doing backups, you can do this with 5 minutes of downtime. That's pretty cool. A lot of people say, "I don't want to upgrade because I can't be down all weekend." And I say, "What? All weekend? Get out of here." I mean, even for a 15,000 terabyte database, so that'd be, whatever. You don't have to be down all weekend. You can be down for a real short amount of time, maybe 15 minutes if you're like really busy transactions and your transaction logs are huge every 5 seconds. But for most of us normal people, we can do this with fairly low downtime. So we're live, but not them, right? So when you're live, don't make it live for your users yet. Make it live for your smoke testers. Your smoke testers are in your checklist. You have their information. They've been told to be here ahead of time. They're ready to go. If you're allowed to, and if you can afford the downtime, have a window, even a 5-10 minute script. Just run these automated scripts, run these tests, make sure it's good. Make sure that the tests don't change data, right? You don't want to change the live production data because we have to roll back. Now you have to deal with that. How do we deal with that? So the goal here is to say, you've already tested 3 weeks ago. Does everything work the way it did in test? Because it doesn't always work the same in production. I mean, everybody here, especially my developer friends, it worked fine in dev is a saying that's perfectly valid. I mean, it's actually perfectly invalid, but it's perfectly valid. It did work fine in dev. Now we went to production and something was a little bit different. Production is different sometimes, and you've not yet tested in production. You've tested on the new server. You've tested on the new database on the new server. You've actually done a very comparable test, and we'll talk about that in one of the blog posts. You've really done a production test if you're doing a migration, but you've not tested the real web server. You've not, maybe you have multiple, but you've not done the full test. You're doing your first full test right now, and then have a sign off. And don't just have the sign off be you, have the team sign off, get management to sign off, and have decisions for rollback and not rollback. And once you're done from that point, and when you're ready to pull the big switch and push people online and do your redirects and set up your CNAMEs and all that, it's done. Your rollback is not as easy as rolling back anymore. You have to now do backups and restores. It's still easier than an in-place because you have the old server kicking around. And that old server, by the way, is kicking around for what I call Operation Honeypot. Keep that old server up. Keep it up for as long as you can, license-wise and server-wise. Keep it up for a couple of weeks anyway. And if you took my advice and you're a CNAME changing fool like I am, and you use this as your chance to change your CNAME, what's going to happen now is anybody who's connecting to prod SQL 08 for your 2008 prod SQL, when they connect to that server and they try and log into their databases are offline because you've left the databases offline. And now in the error log, you have a memorial of somebody connecting to your old server. And now you can go and find those stragglers because there will be stragglers. I can probably count on 1 or 2 hands the time I've not seen little oopses afterwards. They happen because something changed, somebody didn't explain something. Even with all the due diligence, there's a couple things that just didn't get caught. So catch them and look for them. Now you're gonna be good. So, and not next week is in next week's webinar, but the next week after you upgrade, be paranoid. Don't just go yes, and then go home and say I'm taking the week off. I upgraded to the SQL Server beast. We're done. Do not call me. No, be there Monday, be there Tuesday, be there Wednesday. Watch how the users interact. Watch performance, right? We talked last week about legacy cardinality estimation. I'm a fan lately of always using legacy cardinality estimation mode on new databases I migrate up. So that way I can take advantage of new compatibility mode, but let the queries run the way they would on the old CE. And I don't want to use the new CE until I've had time to performance test and regress all the environment. And if you're not doing that, I'd rather just go into there. But if you didn't want to do that, you better be watching with Sentry One, watching with a monitoring tool, watching with SP who is active, watching with DBA checks, one of those PowerShell modules. You need to be watching for issues, watching with Query Store. Watch for people having login failures in the new environment because some database that they were expecting to be there isn't there because you forgot a database even though you had a checklist. But don't relax, right? Celebrate after, I say a good day, but celebrate after you have a good week of production. And don't forget that month end will happen. And don't forget that quarter end will happen and year end will happen. I've seen environments that upgrade to a new version, and a year later, finally, when year end runs, they say, oh, we forgot about that. So think about these things, right? And I think that I have something in here. I thought I had something about the server. I don't. I'm going to say it now. Maybe I skipped over the slide. Don't just think about SQL Server unless you're in a platform as a service environment. I know I have a slide there for that. Whatever. Unless you're in a platform as a service option like Amazon RDS or Azure SQL, there's going to probably be something in that local server that's yours. There's going to be something on the C drive or the D drive, some config file, some local SIS package that used to run from a file instead of a the SSIS store. Andy Leonard's here. He can correct me. You know what I'm trying to say. The SSIS catalog. I think he'll tell me if I'm wrong in a second. But you're gonna have something out there. Maybe it's a file share that was being used. Maybe you write to some path locally, or you write to some weird path that thing too perfect. Yeah, it's just we're getting older, Andy, right? But it's you need to check and you need to look and see what else is being used, because that's where you're gonna have the weird problems with, So keep the old server around if you can, so you can copy and replicate. And then your recap and homework is really, get the checklist. Again, the checklist is a work in progress. It'll be there Tuesday in the blog post. Maybe Monday. I have had the transcript service running over the weekend or Friday night, so I might get the blog post up over the weekend to go live Monday. But when that goes live, there'll be a couple downloads. One of the downloads will be our health check. Our health check's already in last week's download. This week on Tuesday, we'll have the upgrade checklist and the server build checklist. So how StraightPath builds a SQL Server, and then a sample upgrade step checklist. Play with DBA tools again. Do a health check of your server. And again, we talked about this is last week's homework, so our PDF is there in last week's post. But do a health check if you've run it before. Read my rant on Stack Overflow on DBA Stack Exchange about the in-place upgrades. Send me questions, right? So next week we're talking about after. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about, we're going to talk with the whole team at StraightPath. We'll have a live Q&A on Google Hangouts. We'll see how that works. Whoever wants to on the team. I'm not going to make everybody do it. We'll have a Google Hangout. And in that Google Hangout, we'll answer your questions. So if you have a question now, send me an email or ask in the chat. When I say, I'll stick around for questions for a few minutes. I won't click stop, because apparently when I click stop, you can't question me anymore. I just won't put that into the YouTube. So I'll stop the YouTube right about here. So thanks for attending. But get working on your plan. Send me a question, any questions you want to have discussed about your situation. We'll keep it anonymous in the chat next week or 2 weeks from now. Really, we're happy to do it. Look at the blog post for the downloads. And then again, next week, we're going to talk about the after, right? So what do we do after? And again, next week is really good if you're upgrading or not. It's really just DBA 101. I call it, people say adulting. It's like DBAing, right? So we're DBAing instead of adulting. So anyway, thank you. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar again.